What is a true fact so baffling, it should be false? People were deliberately infected with malaria to cure their syphilis, and the man who developed this treatment, Julius Wagner Jauregg, received the Nobel Prize for it. The extremely high fevers of the malaria infections killed the syphilis bacteria. Then the patients were cured of the malaria using quinine. From 1613 and 1620 a samurai traveled to Rome by way of Mexico. During this time, Shakespeare was still alive. Virginia had been founded for around a decade. Galileo was accused of heresy, and Pocahontas arrived in England. He met the Pope. He was made a Roman citizen. His name was Hisekura Tsunenaga, and was the last Japanese person to officially visit Europe until around 1860. If sound could travel through space, the roar of the sun would be deafening even though it's 93 miles away. Edit. Because space is a vacuum. Sound can't travel though a vacuum. Edit again. Obviously lots of other things in the universe would change. And yes, presumably other stars and planets would make noise too. We'd probably all die screaming as the Earth itself imploded from the pressure of traveling so fast through a universe that wasn't a vacuum. Last edit. Yes. Jesus Christ, Rick and Morty, as hundreds of you have pointed out. The record for most children born to one mother is 69. To the wife of Fyodor Vasilyev, B. 1707 Osork, 1782, a peasant from Shua, Russia, in 27 labors. She gave birth to 16 pairs of twins, 7 sets of triplets and 4 sets of quadruplets. Edit. Wife name is Valentina Vasilyeva. Saddam Hussein was an erotic romance novelist in his spare time as the dictator of Iraq. Source. The longest time between two twins being born is 87 days. There is an extremely rare condition called Stone Man syndrome. It causes any smallest damage done to tissue to regrow into a bone. Speaking briefly, people affected by this sickness slowly turn into living statues as they get older. There were more planes destroyed in World War II than there are currently intact planes on Earth today. More people died making the V-2 rockets during World War II than were killed by them. Cheetahs can't roar, but they can meow like house cats. One day Mao Zedong saw a sparrow eating grain. Thinking that the sparrows were hurting China's grain supply, he and the Communist Party launched the Four Pests campaign. The Chinese military and population killed every sparrow they could find. Embassies didn't allow the Chinese to kill sparrows on their property, so the Chinese banged pots and pans outside the embassies 24/7 until the sparrows died of exhaustion. Unfortunately for the Chinese, sparrows mainly eat insects, not grain. The locust population exploded and 43 million people starved to death. Stalin, Hitler, and Freud all lived in Vienna at the same time. Edit. And as others have pointed out, including a source further down, Tito and Trotsky were also there. We live many times closer to the last dinosaur than the first and last dinosaur did to each other. A 500-pound, cigarette-smoking, beer-drinking brown bear named Wojtek was enlisted and served in the Polish army during World War II. Private Wojtek helped the Polish win the brutal Battle of Monte Cassino, and was even promoted to corporal. Following the war, he retired in Scotland. The life of Frane Seluk, the luckiest and lucky man in the world. Also January 1962, Frane is riding on a train through a freezing canyon when it fell into an icy river. All 17 other passengers died while he escapes with a broken arm and hypothermia. Also 1963, on his first plane trip he was sucked out of the plane's door and landed in a haystack, unscathed. 19 other people were killed in the crash. Also 1966, he was riding in a bus when it skidded off the road into yet another icy river. 4 passengers drowned while he only received some minor cuts and bruises. Also 1970, his car's engine burst into flames while he was driving, but he managed to escape before it exploded. Also 1973, in yet another driving incident, his car's engine was doused with hot oil from a broken fuel pump. This caused flames to shoot through the air vents, singing off all of his hair. He was otherwise unharmed. Also 1995, he was hit by a bus but only sustained minor injuries. Also 1996 to escape a head-on collision with a United Nations truck on a mountain curve. He swerved into a guardrail that broke on impact. To save himself, he jumped out of his car's open door and grabbed onto a tree branch as he watched his car plummet off the cliff. Suffice to say the guy had a complicated relationship with the Grim Reaper. Edit. Got his name wrong. Edit 2. Got the first edit wrong. Turns out I was right the first time. When Mt Everest was first measured it was exactly 29,000 feet. It was reported as 29,002 because exactly 29,000 was not believable. If every single person on the entire planet took part in a rock paper scissors contest, where everyone paired up and played, losers were knocked out and winners stayed on etc., you would only have to win 33 times in a row to beat all 7.53 billion people on the planet. Giraffe seat bones. If you earned $1 every second, it would take 2,921 years to have more money than Bill Gates. When a woman with breast implants is cremated, the implants will melt into goo. It drips to the bottom of the furnace and needs to be cleaned up once cooled. To scale, the distance between a nucleus and orbiting electron is 16 times longer than the distance between the Sun and Pluto. TSA's fail rate is over 80%. I personally know someone who in his carry-on accidentally packed a loaded handgun, made it on the plane, and was so freaked out when he landed, he UPS'd it back home and took a Greyhound bus after his trip. Nintendo was founded in 1889. There is no universally accepted definition of vegetable. It's a cultural and culinary term, and varies from place to place. Oxford University predates the Aztec Empire by over 200 years, and, for fun, one of my favorites, woolly mammoths were still around at the time the Great Pyramids in Giza were built. An eyewitness to Lincoln's assassination at Ford's Theater told his story on national television. Edit. Based on suggestions below, I'm proposing a new version of this factoid which makes it sound even crazier, but still factually true. An eyewitness to Lincoln's assassination at Ford's Theater appeared as a contestant on a nationally televised game show with Lucille Ball. A million seconds ago was week before last, the 24th of July. A billion seconds ago was 1988-1987. Full stop. Full stop. Full stop. Ed. Made some rounding errors. We're looking at November 1987. If Earth was a basketball, to scale the moon would be a tennis ball. It would orbit around 7.5 meters away, which is a lot farther than most people think. If the nucleus of a hydrogen atom was a tennis ball, to scale the electron would orbit at about 2,500 meters away. There is no ball small enough to compare to how small electrons would still be at this scale. If you're launching from Earth, the most difficult place to reach in the solar system is the Sun. The reason for this is that to fly directly into the Sun you need to first launch from Earth, and then remove all of your orbital velocity around the Sun. Anything less will just put you into a different orbit around the Sun rather than directly into it. The amount of power required for that to do it directly is basically impossible currently. As an alternative you could, for relatively little power, fly all the way out to Pluto distance, slow down much less, and then fall back into the Sun. The trade-off being the travel time is now about 90 years. There are other in-between paths that could get you there for different balances of energy and time, but all of them are tougher than getting basically anywhere else in the solar system with an equivalent balance. There's a mission currently traveling to study the Sun, the Parker Solar Probe. It won't be flying directly in, but plans to make the closest passes than any probe ever has. It's going to make 7 passes by Venus to shed speed so it can get closer and closer to the Sun. The full flight time is planned as just less than 7 years. As of this post they are 1 week shy of a year in. A morbidly obese person can survive with absolute starvation without any sickness or feeling ill, under close control. There have been studies since 60s. There is a patient in 1973 who went under a 382-day starvation diet for therapeutic purposes under close control with only vitamin and mineral supplements and water intake without protein, carbohydrate or fat intake. No food at all. Dropped from 207 kilograms to 88 kilograms and maintained it. After a follow-up checkup 5 years later, the patient was 96 kilograms. Stabilized. Prolonged fasting had no ill effects. If anybody is curious about the article, the PubMed ID is PMC 2,495,396. Edit. Fixed autocorrect. Switzerland has accidentally invaded Liechtenstein thrice in the last 50 years. On the first time in 1976, Swiss military got lost and ended up in Liechtenstein, so the Liechtensteiners offered them drinks like proper hosts. On the second time in 1992, Swiss military forgot that a certain observation post was actually not in Swiss territory but in Liechtenstein territory, so they just said sorry and forgot about it. Then again in 2007, the Swiss army got lost and entered Liechtenstein, but eventually realized they weren't in Switzerland anymore. Toto. So they turned back. Liechtenstein didn't even know this happened till the Swiss apologized again. To which they basically said, no problem, bro. Takeaways. The Swiss army are bad with directions. The Liechtenstein army people are chill brothers. It's pretty well known by now, but calculators today have more computing power than Apollo 11. We got to the moon with slide rulers and huge balls. President John Tyler, born in 1790, has 2 living grandsons. There are more trees on the earth than stars in the Milky Way. Every time you shuffle a deck of cards, you've probably made an entirely unique order, as compared to every other shuffle in history. There is no good metric for the number of languages on earth. This is mostly because linguists cannot agree on what constitutes a new language and what constitutes a dialect of an existing language. The best current metric of how many languages exist is the number of translations of the Christian Bible. GPS satellites have to compensate for time dilation, because time runs at a different rate in orbit. Ireland was a net exporter of food during the Great Potato Famine. Even if 99% of Earth's population thought you were unattractive, 76 million people would still find you attractive. You can fit every planet between the Earth and Moon, including all the gas giants. But if you lined up all of Jeff Bezos's money from end to end, it wouldn't fit between the Earth and Moon. It could go to the Moon and back 34 times. Jeff Bezos has enough money to make a ladder to the Moon, and to make it out of money. The Tyrannosaurus Rex lived closer in time to us than it did the Stegosaurus. In chess there are over 9 million variations after just 3 moves each. 288 billion different possible positions after 4 moves each. In a complete game there are more possible positions than there are electrons in the observable universe. If you shrink down our sun to the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would be equal to the size of the continental United States. Space is huge. Mike the Headless Chicken lived without a head for 18 months. Only 4 people have been to the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the ocean. One of those people is James Cameron, the director of Titanic. You see your nose all the time, but your brain just ignoring it. The color orange is named after the fruit. Sense of smell is molecular, meaning that molecules of what you are smelling are actually inside of your body as a result of smelling them. Think about that the next time you enter a public restroom. There was this French guy named Terror in the late 1700s that could eat anything, in any amount. He was able to eat a quarter of a cow on one day and ate dinner for 15 for one meal when he was being tested. He was even able to swallow an entire eel, with bones included, without hesitating. When he went to the military service, they used him as message transport. But after being captured he went back and tried to find a cure. In the hospital where he was staying, he was suspected of eating a baby, so they kicked him out. He was average weight, and when he died a few years later they could see inside his stomach just by opening his mouth. Here's a video which explains it on better detail. Sharks evolved before trees did. Abraham Lincoln was born in 1809 and the first dinosaur fossil was discovered in 1819. This means that he went his early childhood without going through his dinosaur phase. Taser is actually an acronym for Thomas A. Swift's electric rifle, TASER. The Planck scale is the smallest known unit of measurement. If you were to expand a single atom until it was the size of the observable universe, about 92 billion light years in diameter, a single Planck unit at this scale would be about the size of an average tree, comma. The speed of light is always the same, regardless of the relevant speed of the observer. Say you're standing still, and a car passes you at 60 miles per hour. It passes you at 60 miles per hour, right? Say you're driving at 30 miles per hour and a car passes you at 60 miles per hour. Because you're already moving at 30, the car only moves away from you at 30 miles per hour. Light doesn't work this way. If you're standing still and turn on a flashlight, the beam of light moves away from you at light speed. But if you're moving at half the speed of light and turn on a flashlight, the beam still moves away from you at light speed, even though it's only moving at the standard speed of light. So even people who aren't moving half the speed of light see it moving at the same speed as you do, which isn't possible, but is somehow true. It makes no sense and makes me think there is a lot of physics we still have to learn, and I bet we find out a lot of the things we know are wrong. You are closer to being a millionaire than Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos. In Florida it is illegal to tie an elephant to a parking meter without first paying the meter as if the elephant were a car. Where in Florida do you find live elephants? Please don't say Disney World and Dumbo. The phrase plastic surgery has nothing to do with the material. Plastic surgery as a field predates the development of plastics by 70 years. The two terms simply share a Greek word root meaning sculpted or reshaped. In the last 3,000 years, there were only 268 years in which there was no war in the world. The youngest mother to give birth became pregnant at 4 years old. We live closer to the lifetime of Cleopatra than she did to the building of the Great Pyramids. A black widow spider's web is 12 times the tensile strength of steel. In 1000 BC, a war was cancelled due to rain. Edit, Warufus Silver. Thank you, stranger. There used to be a radioactive energy drink called Raditha that was in the US market for a decade from 1918 to 1928. Some of the more prominent users had to be buried in lead coffins. Giant squids have a donut-shaped brain so their esophagus can run through the middle. If they try to swallow too large a bite of food they can get brain damage. The USA is the third most populated nation on Earth. If you were able to add 1 billion people to the US population today, it would still be the third most populated nation on Earth. Greenland extends east of, west of, south of and north of Iceland. I just read a post on our technical truth. We've all kicked a pregnant woman before. 17-inch pizza is bigger than two 12-inch pizzas. 1 billion seconds is about 31 years. If you could fold a piece of printer paper in half 103 times it would be the width of the observable universe. Your head ages faster than your feet. If a gorilla looks grumpy, it's because they are relaxed and at ease. Polar bears are left-handed, all of them. Edit, whoops. Turns out this isn't true. I'm a fraud and a hack. Sharks have been around longer than trees. The smell of freshly cut grass is actually a distress signal. It's the smell of the grass releasing chemicals to save itself from injury. Millions of trees are planted each year because squirrels forget where they hide their nuts. There is a 1 in roughly 5.2 to the 61st power chance that if you were to slap a table, all of the molecules in your hand and the table would miss each other and your hand would go through it. Story time. I learned this fact from a deep intellectual conversation with my engineering class 2 years ago, so there very well could be some kind of detail I'm missing here, but nonetheless, what I said is theoretically true. The gravity of black holes is so great that it literally bends light around the black hole, so that if you could somehow stand close enough to a black hole and look straight ahead, you would actually see the back of your own head. You could take away all of Wayne Gretzky's goals that he scored during his career and he would still be the all-time NHL points leader off his assists alone. Bonus Gretzky fact, he and his brother own the record for being the highest scoring pair of siblings. Brent had 4 points in his whole career. Every 2 minutes, we take as many photos as all of humanity took during the 1800s. If you took every civilian-owned firearm in the US and laid them side by side, you would have a giant belt of guns long enough to go completely around the moon. After going completely around the moon, you would still have enough guns left over to equip every soldier in the world with 2 guns. When a guy comes, his semen travels at 28 miles per hour. The TNT Minecraft parody song has more views on YouTube than the original song Dynamite. Most early human inventions like stone tools, fire, and clothing weren't invented by humans at all. They were taught to humans by our hominid ancestors. One of the tracks in Doom 2016 features an actual chainsaw used as an instrument. Light behaves differently when observed or not. David, the statue by Michelangelo, was made from very mediocre marble that literally nobody wanted to sculpt, but it was too expensive to throw away. Everything in the universe is either a potato or not a potato. Anne Frank, MLK Jr., and Barbara Walters were all born in the same year. Edit, Anne Frank. Water is the only substance that expands and becomes less dense as it cools. If it didn't, ice would sink to the bottom of the ocean and eventually freeze the entire planet except a thin skim of water on the surface as the sun shone down on it. Basically, life would never occur.